Welcome to Malfunctioning Eddie's Rocket Car Emporium. After the Planet Express crew helps Amy shop for a new car, she invites Fry on a drive around Mercury. Unfortunately, the car runs out of gasoline at the worst possible time, forcing them to call a tow. By the time the tow truck arrives, the two of them have had time enough to talk and get to know each other that they realize how well they get along, and an intimate relationship soon follows. Meanwhile, Bender has the brilliant scheme of renting himself out as a computer dating service to earn some spare cash. With Valentine's Day approaching, business explodes almost immediately, and even Leela signs up. But as for Fry, he starts to wonder if maybe his relationship with Amy is getting too serious too quickly. So when Amy takes him out for a romantic lunch on Europa, he clumsily invites Dr. Zoidberg along, hoping the extra company will help to put some space between them. The trip does not go well. As they drive to the picnic site, Fry hands Zoidberg the wheel so he can talk to Amy and break up with her. But Zoidberg crashes the car and Fry blacks out. When he comes to, Zoidberg explains that they're all safe and fine, but Fry's body was badly hurt in the crash. Zoidberg was able to save his life by grafting his head onto Amy's shoulder, where he'll have to remain for a few days while the doctor patches up his body. Their relationship over, Amy makes plans for Valentine's Day with another man, forcing a desperate Fry to sign up for Bender's dating service so he won't be a third wheel. At dinner, Fry's date turns out to be a flop as she leaves just minutes after arriving. Amy, conversely, hits it off with her date, and the two of them get up to leave together, dragging a horrified Fry along for the ride. It's then that Leela cuts in, her own Bender-provided date also a disaster, and tricks Amy's date into talking at length about his work, distracting him from going home with Amy. A grateful Fry quietly thanks Leela for saving him. Soon, Zoidberg has finished his work on Fry's body, and his head is safely returned to it. Fry apologizes to Amy, and the two agree to remain friends. She tells him that she'll carry the new scar on her shoulder happily, as it will remind her of the fun they had together during their time as a couple. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past. So that President's Day sale ad with Washington and Lincoln's heads, huh? That's so cheesy that if we could keep heads alive, I legitimately believe some used car salesman would actually do that.
Oh, definitely.
Arguably, we're already doing it now, and with deep fakes and putting CGI versions of actors back in movies.
Yeah, I guess so. Jeez.
And actually, specifically car dealerships, that happened out here in California after Jim Varney died, because Ernest used to be one of the spokesman for Cerritos Auto Square, and then when he died, they replaced him with a CGI version, not like a deep fake version, but like an animated CGI version with a voice actor, and the commercials did not last long. I would imagine they got a lot of negative feedback from it.
Yeah, that's horrifying. Honestly, though, there were a lot of really good jokes with that car shopping scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Plymouth V'ger.
V'ger.
Yes, more Star Trek references.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that one, but yeah, that's a good one.
There was the coffee, because, I've gone to car dealerships before, with my parents, as a kid, and there's always free coffee.
Well, yeah, because coffee is dirt cheap and it gets people talking. I like Malfunctioning Eddie, which is he's obviously a parody of Crazy Larry.
I mean, it's sort of the crazy whatever their name is used car salesman. It's kind of a cliche at this point.
Yeah, Crazy Iqbal, Crazy Gideon, or out here in Southern California, Crazy Gideon. But Crazy Larry was actually a fairly infamous one, because he had mob connections, and he went on for like decades doing fraud and everything to defraud his investors and things, and false reporting on his income. And he actually paid for one of his distant relatives to go to school to become an inspector so that he could have not necessarily have his relative pass the inspections, but he could have his relative like know what's like the inside goings on of the inspection committee, so that he would be able to abuse it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
actually a really fascinating the kind of stuff that he did.
Man, the Ford Thunder Cougar Falconbird, that is an amazingly dumb name.
Well, you have to appeal to the super macho crowd for that sort of thing, because obviously when you're trying to buy a car,
And I can imagine you can hear it for miles.
God, like, Fry even saying that he's not interested in the salesman just immediately jumps to questioning his sexuality, and Fry starts panicking. Masculinity is so comically fragile, and yeah, this whole image of traditional masculinity exists purely to sell you shit.
yeah, which
Yeah.
I mean that is exactly the joke. He's not specifically that, and that's the thing about it. He's not the one questioning Fry's sexuality. He's implying that other people will question Fry's sexuality. Which is like he's automatically passing the buck on to somebody else, which is just a diabolical way of doing it. It's like I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying. It's like, fuck you, yes you are.
It's preying on your insecurities.
Which I mean, it's really not unusual for that type of joke when you're like in a high pressure situation, and they do make that joke a lot on pretty much any kind of Fox show and a lot of other stuff as well. But Fox tend to do it a lot as well. Just like when you're losing, just question their masculinity, and it works because, and the thing is, they make these jokes because they know that it's an easy target. The joke is that it is an easy target.
I mean, there was that joke on The Good Place that they're called the baby boomers because one tiny pricked their ego and boom, they turn into babies.
I haven't seen that on The Good Place, but I have seen that floating around.
You need to watch The Good Place. It's a fantastic show.
I need to as well.
Like, the thing, traditional masculinity and just cis straight men, just, it is so fragile, and I find it as hilarious as I find it frustrating, but like to stick on topic, like, muscle cars are already super impractical, but the Thunder Cougar Falconbird looks impractical even by those standards.
It would go on shitty car mods.
Yeah. Honestly, I just want to say Thunder Cougar Falconbird one more time. Thunder Cougar Falconbird.
It's one of those fun words.
I so wish hover cars worked like they do in this. I'm terrible at parallel park. My friend and I make that joke all the time whenever he has to go to parallel park. He's like, I'm terrible at parallel parking.
I think a lot of people are terrible at parallel parking.
Yeah, but there's just the idea that she can literally move sideways. It's called crabbing. She can literally crab with the car, and she still ends up hitting the ones in front and behind her.
It's a good joke.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of Amy's car, that is the most over-the-top parody of luxury cars I've ever seen, and my mother drives a Lexus.
It's got a built-in toaster.
There's a video phone in the steering wheel. Yeah, there's a toaster. What is the point of any of that stuff? And hell, while we're at it, a margarita mixer built into a car feels like a recipe for disaster.
I mean, the video phone thing doesn't seem too out there, at least. But everything else, yeah, totally.
I mean, sure, at the time, car phones were at one point a thing. It's just that, like, cell phones now exist. So why would you need a phone built into your car?
Which was kind of the joke that they were subverting, where she takes out the little pocket thing, but actually it's a makeup kit because it's a video phone, so she has to make herself look good.
They predicted FaceTime.
Yeah, well, FaceTime, which, I mean, that was a kind of a thing in the 60s, too, where they were talking about, we're going to have video phones, and you have this woman, like, making herself up before she answers the phone, and, like, why would you want to do that? Why don't you just want to answer the phone and you look like shit? You have to look nice all the time now?
Ugh, God. And then, of course, when they run out of gas, the sign says that Higgs fuel is 4,750 miles in either direction. And I noticed the math is off, because the total there is 9,300 miles, but the actual circumference of Mercury is 9,525.
Is it an oblique spheroid?
I'm not sure.
That could have been just like one particular angle around it, because it wouldn't be perfectly spherical.
Maybe.
And it's not like it's terribly high off. It's not like it's thousands of miles off.
No, but 225 miles is a lot.
Yeah.
That said, I do like the joke of Higgs fuel since Hg is
Hg is mercury. Yeah.
Ah.
I was gonna point that out.
I also really like the joke of the mechanic assuming they're, making love, but they're just playing cards.
Yeah, because it's all steamed up.
Yeah, I've never had sex in a car, but I assume it must be very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
I don't know why it's such a cliche. It just doesn't seem fun.
It again, probably a cliche that came from the boomers, where they would go to the drive-in.
I guess. Or, so you can have teenagers boinking outside of their parents' houses.
Yeah, because once they have their car, they can go anywhere they want. It's just like the inspiration point, or wherever they call it.
I don't know.
Where they park their cars to make out.
One thing I did notice is, because they have this President's Day, sale going on, but Valentine's Day is coming up, which I know sales, typically go on longer than a holiday might, but still, Valentine's is before President's Day.
I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Yeah, it probably is just a case of the sale going beyond the holiday.
Yeah, because I think usually they'll try to push these sort of things, because February, President's Day, Valentine's Day, it's usually kind of a extended thing, or they could have maybe moved President's Day in the interim time.
More likely Valentine's, though.
Although, speaking of Valentine's Day, what do you think of Fry and Amy?
I like them as a couple, because they did make that joke about it it was kind of a joke in the Titanic episode, but here they actually work pretty well as a couple, because they're both fairly young. It's not actually quite obvious what their ages are, but I think he's closer to Amy's age than Leela's.
Yeah, all we know is that he is a college dropout and she is a grad student, so they probably are around the same age. I can't imagine Leela would be all that much older, though. I think they probably are all around more or less the same age, but yeah, Fry and Amy really do have very cute chemistry. They've got a lot in common. They're a good couple.
Yeah, it's really sweet.
Why did Fry have to ruin it just by being a jerk?
Because you gotta return to the status quo.
Yeah, the status quo, but also, Fry is really absolutely wrong. Pretty much everybody in this episode does come off as pretty awful, Bender included.
Yeah,
because I will rant about him in a bit.
But Fry especially, just now she's bothering me while I'm at work. She works there too, you dork.
And she's not even bothering him. She's just saying hi.
That's probably what Leela was going to say. She works here.
Yeah, Fry just acting like Amy is smothering him just because she wants to hang out. I'm just God damn it, Fry. This really is honestly just a little bit out of character. I don't think anyone, a lot of people are really a little out of character this episode.
Except for when they're making fun of Zoidberg.
Especially after, we already had the episode on his planet.
Yeah, it's a very mean episode, which sucks because, an episode about romance shouldn't be like that. Although, speaking of that sort of thing, you have Amy saying, with my body, I think you'll only attract one sort of woman. I'll give him that one. That's pretty funny.
With Fry's reaction to it is oh. Which, you kind of have to imagine what his reaction would be. Is oh, I'll attract that type of woman. Oh, that type of woman isn't interested in this type of man. Which is kind of at least that's one interpretation of it, which is kind of the paradox of the whole interest that men have in lesbians. Is yeah, it's an interest in lesbians, so there's nothing you can do about it.
It's a voyeuristic thing.
Yeah.
It is rare to find a good gay joke in a show this old, but this one is pretty funny. I'll give him that. I like it. Though Amy's not really my type, to be honest.
Well, Amy has that amazing cross-section of the fantasies of guys who want an Asian girlfriend and an alien girlfriend.
Fair enough.
I found it funny that Bender got in trouble with the law for pimping, which implies that sex work is still illegal 1,000 years into the future.
Because he forgot the blackjack. That's the problem.
But yeah, the idea that like it would still be illegal 1,000 years from now is extremely frustrating because it shouldn't be illegal to begin with. Pimping, yes. Sex work itself should not be outlawed. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, people are always going to do it no matter whether it's legal or not. And the best way to keep sex workers safe is to legalize and regulate it.
Yeah, and it's been, getting worse these days with the crackdown on explicit content online as well.
And payment processors restricting the transactions. It's really always been like this. It's just that, technology is making it even... The technology that made it easier for them and made them more able to do it is now starting to catch up and crack down again.
It's all about making that money,
Yeah,
it's not about making money. It's about making money in the ways that they approve of.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the oldest jobs out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it pretty much predates capitalism because, what else are you going to give somebody that has an intrinsic value?
Yeah, I get there are people who consider it, demeaning or whatever, but, if someone wants to do it, freaking let them.
It's not, honestly, I think the problem is not the fact that it's demeaning. It all goes back to religion.
Yeah.
Religion has this entire idea of, if you're having fun, you're doing it wrong.
You say religion, but it's definitely a Christian-centric view.
Oh, yeah. I know there are religions that find it, that are much more lax on these sort of things, but considering how big the Christian mega virus has gotten, I don't know why I chose that word, but considering how big the Christian community has gotten, and in terms of everything they do all over the world and what they do with their spreading ideals of colonialism and Christian values, obviously this kind of thing would be frowned upon, and that's why they try to control it.
Yeah, it's really not just Christianity, but they are the ones who've most heavily shaped Western culture, so...
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Just that whole, Christian colonialism, Protestant, all those things.
It just... Yeah, the idea that we wouldn't have made any progress there in 1,000 years is disheartening.
Well, the only difference is that now they're robot hookers, so...
Yeah, well...
Which honestly should have fewer rules about it.
To be fair, I just realized, Bender said that it was anti-pimping laws, not necessarily anti-sex work laws.
True, yeah.
So for all we know, sex work itself might be legal in Futurama, it's just that pimping is illegal. That's all we really know for sure. Which, it should be.
I do like how he managed to get a gold tooth in the interim time.
How does a robot get a gold tooth? It's just like a flat mouth plate.
Maybe it's coated.
Well, you just get a different type of metal and put it in there.
Maybe.
Yeah,
he could have. He's probably 80% gold or something.
So after this very long tangent, let's just get back to the episode, I guess.
Right.
So we've got the 2001: A Space Odyssey monolith out by Jupiter, and it's got an out of order sign on it. I love that tag.
I thought that looked familiar.
Although, fun fact, in the novel, it's not Jupiter, it's Saturn. But the film production could not get the rings of Saturn to look convincing with the special effects at the time, so it was changed to Jupiter.
Makes sense.
That's kind of funny.
It's interesting because, so a lot of people talk about how, the ending of that movie is just a mind fuck and it makes no sense. The book explains everything. If you were confused by the ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey, read the book.
Well, in that case, then it's still a failing of the movie because they're trying to make a movie, not a book.
Well, I suppose, yeah. Although, interestingly, they were actually in production at the same time, and each one influenced the other. So the movie was very much, just the result of the director wanting to... of Kubrick wanting to do it that way and make it much more dreamlike, which... does fit with the tone of that bit of the story, but yeah, it is very difficult to follow if you aren't familiar with the book.
Yeah, of course, which that's Stanley Kubrick for you. That's what he does.
Yeah, although my opinion might be, somewhat different than most people because I actually read the book before I watched the movie, and most people don't even know that there is a book.
Most people don't even know that there's several books.
Yeah, there are 3 sequels, and only the first sequel actually got a film adaptation. 2001, 2010, I think the third one was 2061, and then 3001.
I'd say it's always worth it to at least take a look at the original book or book adaptions. In this case, since that's technically both in this case.
Yeah, well, the entire reason the book exists is that Clark was hired to write the story, but he had never written a screenplay before, so he basically was writing it in novel form, and they were adapting it to a screenplay as he was writing it.
Makes sense.
But yeah, the thing is, in this case, the film really is just that much more well-known than the book. Which is interesting because Clark is already a relatively well-known science fiction writer.
Right.
So, apparently in this timeline, Al Gore won? Or will win?
Yeah, Bender has that $500 bill with Al Gore on it. So this episode first aired, I looked it up, in February 2000, before the whole Bush v. Gore kerfuffle. So just a quick recap for our listeners, anyone who might not be American, anyone who might be too young to remember, anyone who might have been there and just might have a foggy memory. The 2000 election, we had, George Bush versus Al Gore, and it was a very close race, and it basically all came down to who won Florida. And Florida was an absolute mess, and I was actually in Florida traveling with my family at the time, visiting my grandparents, and we were there at a polling station, and we saw what a complete mess it was. My dad literally had multiple people come up to him, ask for his help reading the ballots because they didn't understand it.
Wow.
Because it was just that poorly done. So, there were a lot of reports of people voting for the wrong person and, people spoiling their ballots by not understanding the way that it was structured, and it was a whole thing. And it's worth noting that at the time, the governor of Florida was Bush's family member, I think his brother? And it was just such a whole mess, and there was all these mess with counting the votes, and there was the whole meme at the time of Gore begging for a recount, but he was really just pushing for them to count all of the votes before calling it because it was so close. And they ended up calling it before all the votes were counted, and the first calling was for Bush. And
in many cases, this was a thing which the 2000 election actually, I believe, resulted in a lot of changes in the way that the voting and everything is done. Not just using different media, but not just using different materials and different ways of voting, like changing from punch cards to the Inca-vote system, or now the using the digital machines, but also just the way that they're announced.
Yep.
That in many cases, they do not announce election results until polls are closed in the West, because oftentimes they were announcing that certain things were happening when there was still time in the West, and it would influence whether or not they would vote a particular way that they already felt that they had won or lost.
Yep, absolutely. And just also on top of that, I should point out, Bush did not actually win the election. There was a lawsuit. Basically, Gore was trying to get them to count all of the votes before calling the election. And there was a lawsuit over that, and basically the court declared Bush the victor and installed him as president. And then when they actually finished counting all the votes later, Gore had won.
Which again, that's the Electoral College for you.
Yeah, well, even under the Electoral College, he would have won had they actually, counted all the votes and had this lawsuit not happened.
It's just so crazy,
It really was. And can you imagine how different, the timeline, our history would have been had Gore actually been president from 2000 to 2004?
Yeah, because that would have meant Gore was president during 9/11.
Yeah. And, which means maybe not using that to fabricate stuff and then invade Iraq. Mm-hmm. Maybe, hell, because again, there are rumors that, the CIA actually knew about the threat and just didn't take it seriously. Maybe under Gore they would have taken it seriously.
Well, either they didn't take it seriously, or it was just kind of lost in the whole signal to noise ratio, because they get news about threats constantly. So the problem is not more information. The problem is being able to focus on the information that is actually valid and needs to be focused on. The problem is not that they don't know about these things. The problem is they need to know what's actually a valid concern.
That's a good point, but even going beyond 9/11, there's also the whole climate change thing, which Bush did fuck all about, and Gore has spent his entire career ever since then banging on that drum. Like, for all we know, he might have used the presidential bully pulpit to get the ball rolling on that.
Maybe the wildfires wouldn't be as bad, like...
Yeah, we don't know how different things might be had things gone differently from that one election. They could be a lot better. Maybe they wouldn't be very much different, considering what we know nowadays about the Democrat and Republican parties and what's going on there. But
yeah, because like the 2000s, that was really one of the big ones where they both didn't seem too different. They really, like, admittedly I was not voting in 2000, but they really didn't seem that big of a difference at the time compared to the most recent election that was uncomfortably close, where it was absolutely one versus the other.
Well, I was 8 years old in 2000, so I didn't really know what was going on, but like looking back at it now, it really, the 2000 election really was a watershed moment, and pretty much everything that's happened since then, it's like a domino effect.
Yeah, it's easy to look at domino effects in retrospect as well, but it's very difficult to look at these things in context at the time.
Oh, sure. It's just, it's mind-blowing looking back and seeing just how much stemmed from that one mess of an election and the resulting lawsuit and the court decree and Bush getting 8 years in office.
Yeah. Like they say, the simple flap of a butterfly's wing could cause a storm.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're also going to have to stick on some rough subjects for a while because Zap's date. Ugh.
Well, Bender is being... Yeah, Bender here is just... Well, he's going capitalist, which, I mean, whatever, but he had finally discovered that lonely people are a very good demographic to gouge out of their money. Because he decides to start a dating service. Which, I mean, I have used dating services in the past. I have not had much luck with them. But the entire thing that I have noticed about them is that they are not about the actual dating aspect. They are about fleecing people out of their money.
Yep.
Because the only thing that these websites go to the furthest possible distance in order to prevent people from communicating with each other. You can browse information, you can look up all the stuff that they present, but you cannot actually send them a message in many cases unless you pay for like a premium service to do so. In addition to that, they often allow bots to join the site and message you, and you can't view the message unless you have paid for their premium service. And the bot is just either they don't care about the fact that they have bots on their site and they're just botting to try to get you to click their spam link, or they actually allow these deliberately, or they just choose not to do anything about them, or they actually make the bots themselves in order to get you to pay for their premium service when nothing is actually going to happen from it. So yeah, fuck all these dating sites. Like 99% of them are scams.
And in this case, it's a bot running the whole shebang.
Yeah, in this case, it is literally a bot. But at least in his case, some of them actually did end up getting together, so it worked out. I guess not everybody can fail constantly.
I guess, like, what I was talking about, though, like, Zap's date is just honestly an even worse transphobic stereotype than the last one. Just the wig, the voice, the 5 o'clock shadow, the prominent Adam's apple, Zap's whole line, "Wait, you didn't show me your surprise." I do not have words for how gross this is.
Yeah.
Maybe she has a puppy in her purse.
I think we all know what they were getting at with that. with that. I hesitate to even call it a joke because there's no joke there. It's just, haha, trans people exist and aren't they gross? And that's just, again, I don't have words for this.
Addition, the joke kind of here is on Zap, the fact that he is either oblivious or doesn't really care.
I mean, yeah, I get that the part of the punchline is that he's oblivious, but that doesn't really make it any better.
Yeah.
Just like the fact that we're even supposed to find this funny at all is, oh, God, I hate it.
Yeah, it is just abhorrent. It's just hard to put into words, honestly.
Yeah, that's the thing about being trans and watching like these old comedies is it's always a crapshoot watching any given episode. You have no idea whether or not someone's going to slap you in the face and basically remind you that the writers really do not like you. I don't know what else to say about that. Just like
you have to put a lot of this kind of stuff in context. The idea that these things were not as there wasn't as much of a concern about offending a particular subset of people with these jokes, when there has been a much bigger push in recent years to inclusivity and not making jokes at the expense of others for this particular thing. Because of course there are arguments to be made for, well, what about jokes like you have a joke near the end of the episode where Fry is like getting his body back and he cups his chest for a second and he's slightly disappointed about that sort of thing. Or you have a joke about them making fun of Zoidberg. Is like that could hurt people who are ugly or have a bad odor, which I would imagine he has a bad odor. He probably smells like fish.
There's a difference there, just because this whole joke feeds on an extremely harmful stereotypes and ideas that genuinely get trans people killed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is... Okay, so in so many states, in, like, the majority of states in the United States, it is actually legal for what is called the trans panic defense. Basically, like, it is legal for someone to basically be saying, like, I panicked and I killed her because, like, you know, I found out she was trans and I was so grossed out. Like, that is actually an accepted legal defense in most states in this country. When was this,
like...
Now.
No, like, how long has that been possible? Like, how long has that been in the books? Is that from, like, the 50s or something?
It is... I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but in most states, it is still legal now. Thankfully, it's not in the state where I live, but just... cold comfort when one of the best things I can say is, oh yeah, it's not legal to murder me in my state. But, yeah, like, you get my point that these kinds of negative stereotypes, and this all feeds into the idea that, like, oh, transgender women are actually men, they aren't really girls, and it is gross and awful, and I know I keep saying gross, but I am running out of negative words to use here. It is just not okay. And, like, the idea that, like, oh, things were different then, that just makes it worse that these things were so much more accepted at the time.
So, well, if there's any consolation, the fact that you are looking back at this and seeing that things are different means that things are different now. Means that there is something to look back at and see that things were different back then. And or if things were worse back then you can look at things now and say, well, things are getting better now. Not necessarily fast, not necessarily quickly, but things are changing and getting better now. People are more accepting. People are looking at this sort of thing and saying that is not the right kind of joke to make. And that kind of joke will not be made as often or as frequently in the future, which is a good consolation that you can look at this sort of thing from. But yeah, you look at these things that were made back at the time that they were made, and it is a good snapshot of saying just what the cultural zeitgeist was, the kind of jokes that people were thinking of making and people that was acceptable to make at a certain time. It may not have been acceptable back then, and it's certainly not acceptable now. But the fact that you're able to make this change, and the fact that you're able to notice the difference, is a good thing, is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, trans people are on the whole definitely more accepted by the public at large these days. But on the other hand, the small portion of transphobes who are still around are so much more vocal and are pushing back and actually impacting the world and, the legal situation, especially in the UK.
Yeah, I was about to say it's absolutely horrendous in Britain right now.
And yeah, we can blame a lot of that on people like J.K. Rowling, but it also falls in the feet of quislings like Buck Angel, and it's just really. This is not stuff I like to be reminded about, basically.
Yeah, even if it's better, seeing the stuff still hurts.
Yeah. I don't like this whole bit in this episode. It's not good. And I know I talked about this a bit, the last time we had a joke like this, but this one is even worse. It is admittedly only one scene, but it is a bit longer than the last one, even if it's, not as prominent. It's just, I'm revolted. That's really the bottom line there. But, let's move on, I guess. I'm sure there's more to say about the episode. Like, Fry, cupping his chest once he's back on in his own body and being disappointed. Frankly, mood.
Squishy.
I mean, hormones will help there, but, slow going.
I'd share if I could, honestly.
I appreciate that. Maybe someday we'll have a procedure for trans folks to, swap bits, but we're not there yet.
Don't donate one and receive the other. It's like a kidney donation, but.
And medical science is already pretty cool.
So arguably that sort of a joke could almost be interpreted as trans inclusive, because the fact that Fry is looking at that sort of thing is like, oh, that I miss having those were nice to have.
I mean, I have actually seen a trans Fry Futurama fanfic once.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I wish I could remember the title, but that exists.
Do you remember the website?
I do not, sorry. I don't typically read fanfiction.
Oh well.
Probably fanfiction.net, DeviantArt, one of those.
Probably AO3.
Yeah.
I believe it. I just saw someone mention that they had written it on Twitter. I think it was a friend's girlfriend. I can ask, but
Yeah.
We're getting into off topic, but
yeah, I say that's pretty much it for this episode.
There's another thing I was gonna say, but I forget. Oh, I remember. The bank guy. Amy's date. It's funny, him going on and on about, his job.
Bank processing. Well, yeah, if you get someone talking about something they're passionate about.
Yeah, it's really cool. He's so passionate about that.
I mean, I guess someone's got to be passionate about banking industry regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I like the fact that Leela is able to read him so well that she's able to just kind of derail them wanting to go home by just asking about his job. Which, I mean, maybe he hasn't had a chance of talking about that sort of thing. Maybe that's the kind of thing that he was looking for in a date all along.
Math boring.
Although, actually, speaking of him and Amy going home, since Fry's sharing Amy's body, wouldn't them making love technically be a violation of Fry's consent?
Depends on if he only has control over that one arm. I don't know.
I mean, he would still be, in the room,
And forced to be there, and again, on that body, so...
Forced voyeurism? Would that be cuckolding?
I guess, but I think part of the question is, does he, experience the sensation of the rest of Amy's body? Given that he controls an arm, I would say probably, but I mean, we're getting into weird hypothetical questions that end up not happening.
How does it work with conjoined twins?
It's a very bizarre situation.
There's so many questions raised here.
Yeah, and that's why it's science fiction.
All in all, I'm not a huge fan of this episode.
Honestly, it wasn't the trans stuff in this episode that didn't do it for me. I just felt like a lot of the characters were really uncharacteristically cruel to each other in this episode. It's a very frustrating episode to watch, honestly.
Yeah, that's
there were some
of it.
really funny jokes. I like the stuff with the. I just like seeing Fry and Amy hanging out together. I think they're a really cute couple. I like seeing them together, but then just Fry just ends up ruining it. We're just like, God damn it, Fry, you dumbass.
Should have just kept the episode about cars.
Yeah, there's some good jokes. Fry and Amy are really adorable while it lasts, but yeah, the whole episode is just so extremely mean, and then on top of that, there's that whole trans thing, and I'm just, ugh. Overall, I would say that one can probably skip this episode. I mean, I probably will if I end up rewatching the series again.
Yeah. Just read a synopsis and then go on about your day.
Because, yeah, nothing really happens in this episode that has any kind of lasting things other than just Fry and Amy dating for a bit. But that is not exactly unseen before, because they had that sort of relationship going on in the Titanic episode. It was fake then, but still.
Yeah, I think the Fry and Amy dating gets brought up in like one future episode, but that's about it as far as I can remember. So yeah, it's a very skippable episode, and I honestly recommend doing so. It's not great. Definitely one of the weaker ones we've covered so far.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that'll do it, and we will see you folks in the next one.
Yeah, I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day, but it's midsummer now, so...
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your three voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/SpacePod3K. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/SpacePod3K. Follow us on Twitter at SpacePod3K. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew discover pro wrestling in Raging Bender.